One of our customers was a month behind on a hospital project because there was a significant design change required, and they caught up over a weekend applying our technologies. When you say it looks like science fiction, but it's true.
Frio, coffee, tea, or something else? What fuels your mornings?
It's actually tea for me.
Yeah.
With a hefty dose of sweets, though, with the biscuits actually that I eat in the morning. Well, yeah, I can't start without sugar. So not caffeine, but the sugar. Oh yeah,
Do you take sugar in your tea as well?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
can't escape. Yeah, that's it.
Love it. Okay. You got to get the fuel somehow.
100%.
When you were a kid, what did you think you'd grow up to be?
That's interesting. Well, actually, when I was a kid, I dreamt of becoming a fighter pilot. So yes, I'm
Yeah.
of the Top Gun generation, if you will,
Yeah.
right? But then you can probably tell from my picture, but I have glasses, and so my eyesight kind of didn't really kind of allow for that very much, right? So my second passion was video games, and so I steered towards having a career in the video games development, and which I did actually for a few years, before the career that I have now.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, the eyesight will definitely be a hindrance there.
it
What's one
um,
technology that you can't live without?
It's most definitely my calendar, like as in the electronic calendar, like as I go back from the days of the PDA, right? So I have a very bad memory, and I'm way too lazy to use like an actual physical notebook, and so I can't live without essentially a to-do list, and on my calendar. So yeah, unquestionably.
Love that. Yeah, very practical. Uh, if you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact your work has made on the world, what would you want that to be?
Hmm. Well, I would definitely like for the built environment to be kind of visibly different, right? So to become kind of more human centric, right? So and like substantially more sustainable than it is today, right? I think that really it will make my day when it's possible to see that the decisions that people make with the type of technology that we do, right? So are striking, are very visible, measurable, right? So that the affordability has changed of housing or just the built environment overall, and the actual impact, right? So when that kind of moves the needle, and that'll be what I want. That's definitely what I want to see.
That's awesome. Welcome to Machine Minds, everyone. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Francesco Iorio, co-founder and CEO of Augmenta. Thanks for being on the show today, Frio. We're going to call you Frio for the show because
Sounds
I know
good.
that's what you prefer to go by.
Absolutely, yeah. That's my nickname for a long time. No, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Pleasure being here.
It's my pleasure having you. Let's jump into it, though. So before Augmenta, you were deep in computational science and generative design at Autodesk Research. So this has really been a big bulk of your career. What first pulled you into the idea that software could fundamentally change how physical things are designed?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, it goes way back, right? So it goes way back actually into the, let's say, late 2000s, when I saw at the trade show, the big trade show in Germany, the first ever multi-material 3D printer. If you remember, actually, when 3D printers actually were introduced actually to market, but this was actually the first one that could deposit different materials at different places, right? So and that just really kind of struck me because as a computer scientist, I thought, okay, if you can place any materials anywhere in space, what are you going to put where? Like, as in, I immediately kind of thought that this would, rapidly exceed the human mind's ability to think in three dimensions, right? So that's really kind of what started everything, right? So I thought only software, only AI can truly leverage this affordance, right? So that was suddenly available, right? So and I mean, a few years later, it turns out that I was right, but yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess that's such like an eye-opening turning point, if you like, seeing some. I know from I used to, when I started my career, be primarily in software recruiting, so working with developers and the infrastructure side. But when I flipped into the real world, like hardware, hard tech, built space, it was just so eye-opening into a different way of thinking, a different way of looking at the space, and even engineering in general. So for you, it must have been the same.
Oh no, 100%. And again, it's one of those rare circumstances where manufacturing and like science is ahead of our ability to design for it, right? So this happened in biology, medical sciences with CRISPR as well, right? So the ability to manipulate kind of DNA directly, right? So and people just weren't prepared. They didn't have the design tools to exploit it, right? So to truly leverage it, right? So and it's the same, right? So 3D printing kind of opened this new affordance that was where the tools, the technology that we had to design for it were completely unprepared.
Yeah, makes sense. Construction is massive and complex, and famously is very, or has been up until recently, I guess, famously hard to digitize. What made you look at the industry and think this is where AI can really move the needle?
That's a great question as well, right? So for me, it's okay. Construction is a very particular field, right? So where, if you think about it, the built environment is something that really kind of surrounds us, and because it surrounds us, we pay less attention to it. Like it's less immediate what goes into it, into creating it, right? So we just take it as an assumption. If it's just there, like some people, some engineers, some architects do it and build it and design some, but we have very little concept of what that actually means, right? So, but it turns out that construction has this particular characteristic that kind of struck me, where design has no amortization. What does that mean? It means that if you build a car or if you build a phone, right? So you can have an engineering team design it once, but then you can sell hundreds, thousands, millions of the same object, right? So essentially, you're amortizing the time and the effort that it takes to create that design, create that product, right? So also across all essentially the products that you sell. Whereas people don't like to live and prosper in a cut and paste kind of world, right? And so people are fine having the same phone as the other person, right? So, but not the same building. They don't want the city to look the same. They don't necessarily, neighborhoods to actually look the same, exactly the same, right? And so
Right.
this is really, it's really a challenge, right? So the challenge is that, you can't really translate everything that people have done to manufacturing to speed up construction, not verbatim at least, right? So AI is the only technology that can tackle the challenge at the scale and the variety that it requires, that it demands, right? So there's like kind of no shortcut for it, and so it requires really a different framing entirely, right? And that's really fascinating for a technologist, kind of like me, right? So it's an amazing challenge to tackle. So absolutely, it's
What was there a specific moment, or what was the moment where you actually realized like this is more an AI problem than just a software opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, again, I spent many years applying artificial intelligence to manufacturing, right? So to very kind of complex, like aerospace, like really kind of advanced applications, right? So of design and engineering and simulation, right? So again, construction immediately, the moment I actually started kind of looking into it, like it looked like a different beast, like again completely, right? So that it required like really kind of rethinking, like really the fundamental approaches, right? So and again, coming from having done a lot of machine learning, right? So machine learning requires data, right? Data is kind of a scarce kind of commodity, unfortunately, right? Especially in construction, right? So that's the first challenge that we had to overcome. But at the same time, I believe that only artificial intelligence can really capture that level of nuance that is not written anywhere, right? So that is not really in a book, if you will, right? So it's things that people perceive by decades of work in the field, and so that's essentially the combination of the conspicuous absence of data that requires again a very dedicated approach. It requires creating the data, but on the other hand, actually the fact that there are so many unwritten rules, there are so many peculiarities to the problem, the challenge of designing for construction that I thought really like so it became actually quite apparent pretty fast that AI was the only way forward, really.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. All right, let's talk about Augmenta in a bit more detail. And for our
Sure.
listeners that haven't either done a deep dive prior to this or don't understand the construction tech space, how would you explain what you guys do in plain English?
For sure. So in order to create a building, in order to build a building, people need a blueprint, if you will, right? So a construction drawing, some documentation that tells them where to put what. That's really kind of what it amounts to, right? So there's construction materials like concrete, there's pipes, there's all sorts. So they need a map, really, right? So that's what these kind of blueprints actually look like, right? So as Augmenta, we are an artificial intelligence company, and we create bespoke AIs that create these 3D blueprints, right? So it's this complex three-dimensional map that construction companies need to build, right? So to actually create these buildings, to actually kind of put them into the ground, right? So our AI is something that creates these blueprints from scratch. So I mean, you must have heard, or I mean, a portion of the population, knows about ChatGPT and kind of Claude, by now, right? And there is a variant of it called Claude Code. Claude Code is to software development kind of what we are for construction, if you will, right? So we craft AI that, taking in high level, let's say, construction and engineering requirements, it crafts these blueprints, just like Claude Code takes the requirements for an app for your phone and it makes the app, right? So we do the same for the building blueprints. So
very cool. I think that's a great comparison there. Yeah. And you guys describe yourself as building a foundation model for construction and starting right now with electrical design.
that's
What
right.
does that mean in practice, and why did you choose to start with electrical design?
That's also a great question, actually. So in practice, right? So it means that we crafted the very first bespoke artificial intelligence model that has the ability to reason, again, with the nuance of a skilled professional in this trade, right? So in this industry overall, right? So, and at the same time, at the scale and precision that is required to engineer and construct buildings, right? So this is new, like I said, it has never been done, certainly not at this scale, right? So, and like from a pure, let's say, complexity in terms of like geometry and physics, right? So electrical systems are by far the most complex part of a building to design, right? So it takes the longest time, right? So, and it's also, as a consequence, the hardest to teach an AI to design for, right? So we chose electrical systems, like, specifically because we wanted to test ourselves on the hardest problem first, right? So, and to ensure that essentially the technology approach and the data that we were generating, and essentially all the corollaries that we required, right? So to succeed, were there in the platform from day one, if you will. And now that we have proven that, in fact, actually, we solved for that, right? So we're now much more rapidly moving towards essentially design of other critical portions of buildings, right? So like cooling, ventilation, plumbing, structure, right? So everything else, right? So now that we have done the foundation essentially effort, right? So it's much easier actually for us to go elsewhere and build more of the build, design more of the buildings, more portions of the buildings.
Nice. I love that. And a lot of AI today is language first, but your
Yes.
view is that building design is more of a geometry and constructability problem. Why is that distinction so important in what you do?
Well, it's there's many reasons, right? So, but certainly one is about perception, right? So, like, as in the common contact that people have with AI today, right? So is typing, right? So is
Yes.
very kind of language based, right? So the challenge, though, is that machine learning models that deal with language, like all machine learning models actually do, sometimes they hallucinate. So as in they don't produce exactly what you're after, right? So the challenge is that a typo in a chat, sometimes is harmless, sometimes is a headache, right? So, but a mistake of that kind in an engineering design can be, millions of dollars of rework, right? So, and safety implications, right? So because of the popularity, of course, of these large language models, right? So people actually ask us, often, if we built our technology stack, if you will, on top of the classics, if you will, right? The ChatGPTs or the Claudes, right? So, and the answer is no, right? So we had to build something that is bespoke to this class of problems, right? So that really, say, standard models actually are just incapable of dealing, right? So certainly at the scale of large, mission critical buildings like data centers or hospitals, right? So nothing can actually operate really at that scale, right? So, and that's really kind of why we applied actually so much of our effort and our expertise, right? So to craft this very bespoke technology and systems, because we couldn't reuse something kind of off the shelf, if you will. So.
It makes a ton of sense. I've spoken to founders in the robotics space that have said similar as well. They're like, these robots are working in unstructured environments or in the real world physical space that you can't build on top of a language model, what we're trying to do. And I guess exactly the same here.
The real world is a very different beast for sure.
Yeah.
Right? So, and again, even though we used a lot of so-called synthetic data to train, so as in we run our systems in a simulation, right? So this is just so that we can accumulate enough data to even start a machine learning system of the scale and magnitude that is required to understand, right? So the things at the level of a building, right? So, but then nothing beats the real world, right? So when things actually have to be proven, right? So and like actually purchased, assembled in the field, it has to work, right?
For sure. So, what are the hardest constraints that your system has to understand before it becomes useful in the real world?
That's a really great question as well, right? So and honestly, like it's the unwritten ones, as I said, right? So as in it's the kind of stuff that people understand over like decades of walking a construction site, right? So it's not really kind of written in any kind of guidebook or manual, right? So it's something that you pick up over time, right? So and honestly, like look, think about this, right? So we're generating from scratch, from a blank screen, large portions of critical infrastructure, right? At the scale of a hospital, right? Or a data center. So and it needs to be done at really kind of high precision, right? So again, for engineering kind of purposes, right? So that's a really complex problem in itself, right? So, but crucially, there are infinite designs that are correct from the construction code and material procurement perspective, right? So, but the nuance of what actually works for real, like the nuance of what makes sense to install and what doesn't, right? So that a foreman or master electrician or an engineer kind of has, right? So is only machine learning can learn that nuance from observing, really, right? And so that's why we matched our system. Has these kind of two brains, right? So it has the procedural brain has that follows the rules strictly, right? So it needs to be safe, it needs to be deterministic, it needs to be compliant, but it has the abstraction and the bird's eye view of an expert kind of field technician, right, a skilled operator, right? So to take in and do, let's say, command and control at a glance, if you will. Right? So our technology, kind of matches these two souls, if you will.
I guess following on from that, there's obviously a big gap between impressive AI demos and then something that a contractor foreman can actually trust in the real project. What did you guys have to get right to cross that gap?
Well, we had to listen a lot, right? So first of all, right? So we had to go in very humbly and partner extremely deeply with these organizations. That's really, that there's no other secret. There's no shortcut to that, right? So it takes a really significant level of trust to use, any AI, but especially an agent, right, in production, especially for these types of use cases, right? So where AI is actually performed advanced work, right? Assisting, skilled professionals, right? So in their work, right? That have years of experience, right? So these people have no time to waste, right? So the reason why we picked that is that it became really apparent when we started hiring our own internal, subject matter expertise, right? So as a bridge, right? So that there was a lot that we didn't know, right? So we come from technology, right? And to learn kind of what works in the field, especially in construction, right? So again, it takes a lot of listening and a lot of tireless work to make it clear that we're there to help and to help actually to people to win at their field, at their jobs, right? So at their projects, right? So it's really about the technology, but it's even more so about the people, right? So we had to get both right to actually even kind of walk to the door.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your platform can help teams route electrical systems much faster and generate coordinated modules in hours. What does that change for the project teams that are really under pressure?
Yeah, honestly, like, the first thing that is supposed to change, and it does, we see it, right? So is that, teams should stop working 16 hours a day, including weekends. That's sadly, there's a situation kind of right now, right? So people are burning out to try to make their schedules, right? So I mean, never mind to try to deliver early, right? So for their GCs or for their customers, it's insane, right? So this is a technology that allows people to focus on the decision making, right? So not on the drafting, right? So on the nuance, really, on a much deeper interaction with their clients, right? So on value engineering, like all activities that are very difficult to do when you're constantly in a rush, right? So this really kind of changes the outlook of these businesses, right? They can take all of a sudden on more work or deliver more quickly or both, right? So, and organizations like general contractors, notice that, right? So, and in some cases, like the difference is just so colossal. Like an example, one of our customers, right, was a month behind on a hospital project because there was a kind of significant design change required, right? So, and they caught up over a weekend applying our technologies. Like it's something that it's, when you say it looks like science fiction, but it's true, right? So as in, this is truly the level of sophistication, the level of, boost, augmentation, if you will, right? So, or another customer actually that worked actually on a hyperscale data center, and they went to blank screen, like from zero to the first coordination meeting in 72 hours, right? So it's work that generally takes 4 or 5 weeks of
Yeah.
solid modeling for miles and miles and miles of electrical systems, right? So it really changes the dynamics between the various stakeholders, if you will, quite substantially, really, right? So that's our mission, that's our goal all along.
So it's really like AI is taking that heavy lifting of all of the
That's right.
laborious, time consuming stuff. And then the human in the loop is still doing the human part and managing those customers and doing the more creative elements.
That's right. I mean, you nailed it. Like, as in, it's really it's the act of clicking and dragging the mouse for 17 hours a day versus decision making, right?
Yeah.
So these people now have the ability to apply what they learn at school and on the field, right? So without the tedium, if you will, and the stress of always actually being late because they have to place that next piece of conduit, or they have to resolve a clash, right? As in, this is the reality today, right? So we want that not to be the reality in the future, by all means, right? So that's what that's our ultimate goal, right?
I guess a bit more general question, but you can answer it as well from the lens of the customers that you now work with. I'm curious what the construction industry misunderstands about AI adoption right now, or maybe when you start this conversation with them.
I mean, there's nuances there, of course, right? So people hear about everything. There's a lot of noise, right? So
Hmm.
around about AI right now. I mean, it's natural, given the emphasis that everything actually has on artificial intelligence these days, and for a good reason. So um, it's difficult to explain the level of maturity or immaturity of specific AI technologies, right? So especially to people who have hardly the time to listen to you, right? So as in, seriously, like these people are in such a hurry that it's always a struggle, right? So never mind to deploy, but for people to understand what the affordances are, what's real and what is science fiction, right? So and honestly, there are technologies that are much more mature than others, right? So as a factor really of the large scale investments that happened, right? So, and there's a misunderstanding of where that's true and where it's not. Right? Look, let me give you an example, right? So like a ton of work and investment actually went into computer vision, right? So essentially having AI understands what it sees, right? So to recognize objects, etc., etc. Right? So, and this is because of self-driving cars and drones, right? So essentially having navigation systems and guidance, right? So requires, computers to understand, the environment, right? So at least can detect things properly, right? So that has had so much investment and has matured so much that it can be absolutely, adopted to do very accurate, construction progress monitoring, like very, very effectively, like today, right? So it looks like really hard to do, but yeah, no, it's absolutely possible to do, right? So, whereas other things that kind of seem kind of trivial, like like truly making sense of multiple documents at once, right? So, or interpreting a drawing, right? So it's like, what if it can navigate a robot on a construction site and fly around, right, it must be able to look at an architect's drawing. But the reality is that that's not the case. And so for people who are not technologists, it's difficult to to know, right? So, or to actually measure, right? So what's trivial for them and what's trivial for an AI to do, and how they mismatch sometimes, and that creates a lot of misunderstandings. So
Yeah, makes sense. So some exciting recent news. I was reading a press release about the recent announcement of a 5-year strategic partnership. I'll let you take the floor because I want you to just share about what that is, who it's with, and why that's so important of a milestone for you guys as a company.
no, for sure. The partnership is EJ Electric, and we've been in conversation for quite some time, and we're tremendously excited to be working with them, right? So EJ is an extremely well respected firm, right? So it's one of the best, in the United States, if not worldwide, right? So, and they have a truly exceptional growth trajectory. So like for us as a company, as a startup especially, right? So a long-term partnership actually with them kind of really kind of signals the industry's kind of readiness to adopt and invest in advanced technology, right? Even at the bleeding edge, right? So specifically to face the demands that they have, right? So again, demands of complexity, skills shortages, right? So it's really the perfect storm kind of right now, right? And so a player like EJ, performing a partnership and essentially kind of investing for their future, right? So intently, right? So it's I think it's a signal for the rest of the industry. That's why we're particularly proud, and it's a really kind of tremendous milestone actually for us to be working with them.
That's awesome. Congrats. That's huge, especially for a startup, and having a 5-year agreement and partnership is, I think, a testament to what they see in you guys and the value that it brings, instead of it being like, hey, we'll do a 6-month pilot and see what we can do.
No, absolutely. Again, it hopefully speaks again even more so than the technology, which is brilliant, but the people, right? The people is how passionate we are about standing behind the customer and truly being there for them to win, right? So again, I think that they, like our other customers, kind of perceive that drive that isn't necessarily common in software, if you will. Right? But we truly have a unique team, in this place, and people feel it. People realize it when they work with us. Actually, they can tell that is not the average software vendor. Let's put it like this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The EJ, they work on highly complex infrastructure projects. Data centers, airports, etc. What does that kind of adoption by a customer like that tell you about where the market's going or leading in general?
That's a great question. So I mean, it without a doubt, mission critical facilities are a big tailwind actually for us.
Yeah.
But they're also the ones that have the highest, let's say, project completion return of investment, if you think about it, right? So imagine a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant that is being built to output the new the new pill that is going to take the world by storm, right? So no pill goes on the market until the plant is done, right? So, and it's the same thing with a hospital. It's the same thing with a data center. They are extremely high leveraged projects where the capital constraints exist, inflation exists, right? So shortening the time to deliver, right, so these projects is extremely valuable, right? So even a day, I mean, we hear like some insane figures that for a data center to be turned on, even a month late, every month is like tens of millions of dollars of losses.
Wow.
Like it's bizarre, like but that's the reality. So people are trying to do literally everything they can to essentially get construction schedules under control, and even more so like risk, right? So to diminish the variables that can affect the project delivery dates, right? So while of course we intend the technology to be used everywhere, and it is being used in a number of types of projects that aren't data centers or hospitals as well, right? So but certainly the value is obvious in that field. It's particularly kind of striking in that field, right? So, and there's a lot of demand actually for that right now. So,
Yeah. When a major contractor brings AI into core design build workflows, what does success actually look like 6 months or a year later once they've fully adopted it and they're up and running?
yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, uh, look, projects are never instantaneous. That's kind of one of the issues of construction, right? So, project takes so long, right? So that even for a software vendor like us, learning from the positives and the negatives, essentially, of each use of each project takes so long, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, really, design build is probably the one type of project delivery where our technology can make the largest difference in the shortest time frame, honestly. So the reason being that it brings people together, it brings engineers and contractors together, right? So especially as we scale beyond electrical and we get into mechanical, into plumbing, into the full coordination, right? So again, the effect on the construction schedule and pre-construction is going to be quite dramatic, right? So this actually kind of bodes well for essentially any type of verticalization of construction, right? Which is happening before our eyes, right? So as in general contractors are purchasing, skilled specialty subs to essentially self-perform more than just construction manage, right? So like all of these integrations kind of nurture the environment that deploys a end-to-end AI facility, but at the same time, the availability of this AI fosters the turn towards design build, if you will, right? So honestly, so success in this context like means that like really substantial changes to coordination, right? So to design to coordination, even a year from now, right? So the coordination time will be reduced by an order of magnitude, like literally an order of magnitude, right? So and material waste is going to go down, like as in the effects are going to be macroscopic, especially in design build, right?
It's awesome. I'm curious how you balance pushing the market forward without getting too far ahead of how ready your customers are. Because from the outside looking in, it looks like you
Yeah.
guys are building this product, but you're also so early, you're defining the category as well, right?
Indeed, indeed. I couldn't agree more. And this is probably the hardest challenge, right? So, I mean, particularly in construction, right? So you nailed it, really. Right? It takes quite a long time for technology to become useful, and especially technology as sophisticated as artificial intelligence that has to prove itself, like in a difficult field like construction, right? And even more especially so when the work that it performs is at the level of skilled personnel, right? So it's the largest and the highest complexity kind of place we could go. But this actually means that we had to invent kind of everything, if you will, right? So there was no such precedent, and so we had to invent the experience, like what it means for people to interact with this type of technology and affordance, right? And what it means to really like interact with a new product and workflow, right? So and kind of hone it over time, but also to get the technology to a level of readiness where it doesn't suck, just pardon the, but it's just like these people again have no time to waste. They have no taste for something that works only a little bit, right? So it needs to cross a threshold. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let me clear, right? So these people are very tolerant, right? So, but again, there's a threshold to overcome that is a very high bar. It's actually a very hard bar, right? So for us, overcoming that threshold, right? So is likely the hardest thing actually for us to do, right? So and maintaining essentially something that has to run as a business while crafting this experience and this technology, right? So has been essentially one of the hardest things, and that meant yet more so that building the relationships with our design partners that became customers, right? So it has been absolutely paramount, right? Staying close to them, assisting them, learning a lot from them, right? So, and I think that literally there's no shortcut. Once again, I think this is absolutely necessary for anyone who even attempts to do something in this type of environment, especially at this level of sophistication, right? So it's a must. It's a must.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess in parallel to building those relationships with the customers and staying so close to them, something that's close to me and my heart, obviously, is the talent side. So building that team? What kind of team do you need really if you're going off this AI for physical industries where your output has to survive like real world constraints and defining this market or helping shape it? It's probably like such unique skill sets and people you're looking for.
Truly, it truly is. So, and again, it's really a combination, right? Again, it's even more, especially in construction, right? So, it's a combination of the real world experience, right? So, it's like people with deep expertise in the field, with the best scientists, researchers, and engineers you can find, right? So, even more nuanced than that, right? So, physical industries are very peculiar, right? So there's something about geometry, there's something about mathematics, there's something about physics, there's something about kind of spatial understanding, something about semantics, ontology. Like as in, it's such a broad space to put an umbrella on top of, right? So fortunately, I had kind of prior experience of having done this in when I was at Autodesk. I created a team of similar characteristics, if you will. It's a very multidisciplinary team, right? So I've done the same thing, even more so actually here at Augmenta, right? So where it's a true blend of mix, right? So of people from a variety of disciplines and crucially people from the field, right? So people from strict domain expertise, right? So this is, in my opinion, is the only recipe really. And you have to think like considerably outside of the box, right? So as in, you don't want to just have machine learning people. You don't want to have just engineer. There are some disciplines in computer science, in science in general, right? So that are not necessarily immediate to think about when you put together a team like this, right? So, but they are very valuable, right? So maybe I'll keep that little bit a bit of a secret then.
Yeah, some secret sauce for it. I'm curious what you've learned then while doing this, while hiring people who can operate across AI and computational design and construction and the user experience side. There must be like a thread that goes through all of that.
Yeah, the thread is that there are some really amazing people out there. That's what I learned, right? And I love working with them, and I'm learning from them constantly, right? So and. Another thing that I learned is that these are the types of people who really like to work on something that is kind of generation defining, if you will, industry defining, right? So as in, there are problems, in machine learning that are intriguing from the foundational perspective, right? So, but the outcomes, the actual physical realization and manifestation, right? So is maybe semi-interesting, right? So working on problems that affect the real world, especially at the scale of the built environment, is something that some people have a calling for. Let's put it like this, right? So kind of gathering a team that has that perspective and that brings their experience together to solve something at the scale is fantastic. It's really humbling experience.
But it is. As a CEO, what has been the hardest part of translating a deeply technical vision into a business that your customers can actually adopt?
Yeah, that's a great question as well, right? So I'm a technical founder, right? And my past has been traditionally on kind of managing, large scale, kind of, you could call them moonshot R&D projects, right? So making a product, making something that people use every day that doesn't fall over, like all the time, right? So, but something at this level of complexity, right? So is just very hard, right? So it literally is translating the technical vision, really, right? So into the product. The business actually around it kind of solves itself when the product actually exists and works like really well, right? So, but it's truly has been kind of a journey of really translating that vision into code, into kind of tangible outputs, right? So that's certainly by far kind of the hardest part, right? So again, at the end of the day, people don't care if if what they're staring at is a technical marvel, right? So or not, it just has to work, right? It has to work really well, right? But making something of this level of complexity and nuance work well, right? So is it is a great satisfaction and is a greatest challenge.
Yeah. Let's talk about the future of the construction design space before we get to the end of this. I'm curious, in your opinion, if Augmenta succeeds at the scale that you're aiming for, how does the day-to-day work for engineers and contractors and VDC teams? How does that change?
They'll talk to each other more, right? So there will be more collaboration, right? So it's a future where the relationship between stakeholders kind of changes actually quite fundamentally, right? So right now, if you think about it, like as in now, construction actually is very kind of siloed. Like people do collaborate, but it's because they have to. And data goes back and forth. There's contractual obligations. People try to actually kind of do their part of the work and then kind of hand off, to not actually get the liability. Like as in, it's a very complex, mechanism, a very complex machine, right? So I think that what we're aiming for is really something that kind of breaks down some of those barriers, really, right? So makes kind of transparency in a process a byproduct of, let's say, sharing in the success and sharing the profits, right? By all means, right? So, but by more collaboration, more transparency, right? So that's really kind of the aim that we have as a company.
Do you think that the future would be more automated or more collaborative, or like both in that scenario?
Yeah, well, both, right? So as in, like, obviously, like, look, you can't kind of put the genie back in the bottle, right? So as in, automation and artificial intelligence is there, right? So is there today, right? So I don't think there will be any kind of turning back actually from that, right? Especially now that, again, these technologies are reaching a level of proficiency that is like really substantial. Okay? So it's like, it would be like asking, the people who design your microprocessors to go back to a drawing table, right? It's just not like automation is here to stay, right? So AI is here to stay, right? So, but collaboration will remain essential. I mean, so much so that I think that collaboration will be more important because the elicitation and collaboration on what the true fundamental requirements of a project will be the more important part, right? So, which is like similar to what is happening today to software engineering and development, right? So, the definition of what you want a program to be is the art that now differentiates, right? So the really good software engineers that use AI from folks that don't, right? So the outcome is actually very different, right? And so the art will be in how collaborative people will be and how well jointly they communicate to the AI what they are actually intending to do, right? So what they're actually trying to achieve.
That makes a ton of sense. You mentioned before as well, going beyond electrical as well, and you have mechanical and plumbing listed as those future areas. What becomes possible when more trades are designed with this kind of AI-driven coordination?
Oh yeah, a lot. So, I mean, jokes aside, right? So, think about it like this: like right now, we serve the electrical trade and the electrical engineering, right? So, when a stakeholder is equipped with our technology, an overall construction project can only accelerate so much. What it means is that it will still go at the pace of the slowest of the stakeholders that are involved in the design, right? So in construction, right? So that there's no way around it, right? So everything is still at the mercy of coordination, right? So and the process that takes design actually over weeks and months and years, actually depending on the project, right? So but when mechanical, electrical, and plumbing crucially are jointly designed and coordinated by AI, that is actually going to change very many things, right? So because at that stage, it is not only a matter of requiring less effort, right? So from the individuals actually involved in the projects, right? So, but crucially, the actual pre-construction schedules will compress, right? So there will be more time, or the projects will actually get delivered faster, or people will have more time to make crucial decisions, right? So they can postpone a critical decision up to the very last instant and then create the design when all the information is available, for example, right? Or people can just save the time, right? So, but they will have the affordance to do it. They will have a choice, right? So this is actually starting to become interesting for the owners, right? The developers, and not only the practitioners, right? So because when, again, they are the ultimate purse that pays for the entire time that these folks actually do the work, right? And all the construction material and everything, right? So as I said before, right, especially on projects where timing is really essential, right? So then this is going to make a really enormous difference to that.
That is going to be huge. I can only imagine what that's going to mean for the smaller operators as well, to be able to do more with less, right? And be,
Definitely.
it's not, I wouldn't say a level playing field, right? Because obviously these industries require a lot of capital anyway, but they can compete, they can be competitive and, you know, pitch for stuff that probably previously they wouldn't even be able to look at.
100%, 100%. That's already happening. Some of our kind of smaller customers, are punching
Really
way above their weight, right?
interesting.
So it's truly interesting.
You're
So
seeing that across industries, right? This is a
yes,
very good example, but we see it, consulting and finance and everything else. Like now you're able to do more with less people and offer more capability. So it's exciting.
it is exciting. I mean, today again, we don't see them needing less people kind of at all. Actually,
Yeah.
the constraint truly is the people, right? And again, equipping themselves actually with this capability, it just allows them to use the people they have better
In a
and to
better
not
way.
kind of
Yeah.
burn them out. Right?
Yeah.
That's really the point, and do the things on time, right? So that's the way we're actually taking the technology.
I guess the way I was thinking about that is like if you're looking at a brand new company, right, that doesn't already have a workforce and people there, you're not going to
Indeed.
be, now you might be a handful of people saying, all right, we're going to start this company and we're going to be AI native. So we're going into it with the capability of agents and tools and all of this stuff. So we can now do more with less in that respect instead of getting rid of staff because,
100%. No,
so
having no legacy helps a lot sometimes,
yeah,
right? And yeah, this is one of those moments in time when having no legacy can be helpful. Of course, you still have to have the trust and the name, right? So and that kind of counts for a lot, right? So, but yeah,
100%.
some folks actually can surface actually fast with this type of equipment.
True, true. What's one belief that you have about AI and construction that most people in the industry still underestimate?
Well, I think that ultimately it's its power to shake things up, right? So as in, like, I'm not talking about the ability or inability to solve like point problems, right? So where the AI is maybe kind of not there yet, right? So that may or may not happen for specific circumstances, right? So, but truly, it is the monumental effects that it's going to have on the industry overall, really, of how contracts are written, how people kind of talk to each other, how people will try to, verticalize or absorb, or what I mean, like consolidation will have a plot. There's a lot that it has the power to move ultimately because it, as a tool, as an instrument, is so powerful in the fullness of time, right? So I think people are drastically underestimating that factor, if anything, right? So yeah, they could maybe underestimate that. Yeah, the drone will still maybe hit a pole sometimes. It doesn't, right? So but like it's a much more fundamental shift that this will usher.
Amazing. Well, look, Frio, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing all of this. This was like very informative for me as well, and just learning about this space and how you guys operate and how you're having an impact and who your customers are. So I really appreciate you being on and sharing all of this.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure. How can our listeners learn more about you and the company and follow along?
Well, they can visit our website, of course, right? So, and we also use LinkedIn to share essentially our progress, right? So if people can look at our kind of LinkedIn page, actually they can keep up to date on what we do, what we're up to.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we'll put those in the show notes as well, and I hope to stay in touch with you and support you guys in whatever you're doing. Exciting times.
It truly is exciting times. Thanks again for having me, Greg.
My pleasure.